The moment her match was announced, 10,000 seats vanished in just 30 minutes. The tournament director, who has run this event for nearly 2 decades, admits he has never seen anything like it. And now, the Eala Mania that swept Washington has crossed the border, changing menus, forcing venue changes, and turning a Canadian tennis tournament into a Filipino celebration. The moment her second-round match was announced, the tickets vanished. In just 30 minutes. Not for a Grand Slam champion, not for a former world #1. For a 21-year-old from Manila who has turned a Canadian tennis tournament into a Filipino celebration. The National Bank Open in Toronto had never seen anything like it. Tournament director Karl Hale, a man who has orchestrated some of the biggest events in Canadian tennis history, was left stunned by the demand. "We've never seen a player ranked outside the top 5 have this type of effect," Hale told reporters. "I think her fans were specifically waiting to see when she played." The numbers tell a story of unprecedented demand. According to Hale, around 3,100 tickets were purchased immediately after Eala's opening match was announced last Friday. By Sunday, every available seat for Wednesday night's session had been sold. But here's what made this even more remarkable. Eala wasn't scheduled to play on the main court. The organizers had initially placed her match on the grandstand, a secondary venue with just 2,800 seats. That decision was quickly overturned. "Our grandstand court is 20,800 seats. We can't put her on there because she probably sold upwards of 5,000 tickets," Hale told the Tennis Channel. The organizers had no choice but to move Eala to center court, the main stadium of Sobeys Stadium, which holds 12,100 spectators. This was where the biggest stars played. Iga Swiatek and Aryna Sabalenka had already appeared on that court earlier in the tournament. Now, Eala was being treated like a star the tournament had built its schedule around. Hale explained that the demand had been building for months. The Filipino community for months now has been calling in, asking when does she play? Who does she play? Where does she play? My mother knows her uncle, sister's brother, cousin. They were so excited to have her, Hale told ABS-CBN. "We told them when we make the draw we're going to announce her start time. And the phones rang, tickets sold, and boom. It was sold out on Wednesday night just like that. The decision was announced just hours before the match." Eala's match was scheduled to follow home favorite Leylah Fernandez's match against Renata Zarazua. It was a primetime slot reserved for the tournament's biggest draws. But even Hale was surprised by what happened next. "A sold-out Wednesday night this early in the tournament is really unheard of," he said in a news conference. Hale acknowledged the historic nature of the sellout, noting that Eala's popularity transcends the traditional tennis audience. "Alex is an absolute blessing to the sport of tennis at our tournament," Hale said. "So it's an amazing tournament to have her here playing singles and doubles with Venus." The sellout was particularly significant given the context. The opening Wednesday night session at the Canadian Open has a reputation for being relatively low-key. It falls on a weekday when people are working. It's early in the tournament. The stars of the draw are spread across multiple courts. And with no roof at Sobeys Stadium, fans often want to avoid the oppressive summer heat. For any player, let alone a 21-year-old outside the top 5, to sell out that session is remarkable. Eala herself was overwhelmed by the reception before she even stepped onto the court. "Yes, I've been told that it's going to be a full house tomorrow. So I'm really very excited to see and experience the atmosphere," Eala said in her pre-tournament press conference. "It's nice to see that the Filipino community is really showing up and they're enjoying tennis. Hopefully it will help grow the sport as well, and in the end give them a new experience, a joyful experience." "It's been a crazy 24 hours, Eala admitted, describing the whirlwind of winning her first WTA title and immediately transitioning to Toronto. "My mind's just been going back and forth between focusing on the next match and wow, did I really just do that? The stage was set, the crowd was coming, and Alex Eala was about to step onto center court in front of a sold-out stadium, something that had only been achieved by one other player in the last 20 years. A player named Serena Williams. Jason Maglante, Tennis Canada's Senior Director of Ticket Sales and Services, a Torontonian of Filipino heritage, had been watching the phenomenon build for months. Speaking to my family and friends in the community, people started asking me about her, Maglante told reporters. The only thing I know of with this kind of hype among Filipinos in the sports realm would be the boxer Manny Pacquiao. The demand was so overwhelming that even tournament volunteers who were given tickets for Wednesday night had to exchange them for a future session. Multiple volunteers, who typically receive complimentary tickets, had to be reassigned because the demand was simply too high. The decision came swiftly, and it was unprecedented. When tournament director Karl Hale realized the situation he was facing, he had no choice but to act. And fast. The numbers were undeniable. The grandstand, the secondary court at SoBi Stadium, held just 2,800 spectators. That was the venue where Eala's second-round match against Alycia Parks had originally been scheduled. But the ticket demand had already made that plan impossible. Our grandstand court is 20,800 seats, Hale told the Tennis Channel. We can't put her on there because she probably sold upwards of 5,000 tickets. 5,000 tickets for a match that hadn't even been confirmed until Eala won her first round bye. For a player who had only just arrived in Toronto after celebrating her historic DC Open victory just 48 hours earlier. The demand was so overwhelming that Hale had to make a decision that would have been unthinkable just a year ago. Eala's match was moved to center court, the main stadium of SoBi Stadium, which holds 12,500 spectators. This was where the biggest stars played. Iga Swiatek and Aryna Sabalenka had already appeared on that court earlier in the tournament. Now Eala was being treated like a star the tournament had built its schedule around. But this wasn't something the organizers had planned. It was something they had been forced to do by sheer demand. Hale explained that the demand had been building for months. The Filipino community for months now has been calling in, asking when does she play? Who does she play? Where does she play? My mother knows her uncle, sister's brother, cousin. They were so excited to have her, Hale told ABS-CBN. When Eala's schedule was finally confirmed, the phones rang, the tickets sold, and the venue change became inevitable. The decision was announced just hours before the match. Eala's match was scheduled to follow home favorite Leylah Fernandez's match against Renata Zarazua. It was a primetime slot reserved for the tournament's biggest draws. We told them when we make the draw, we're going to announce her start time, Hale said. And then the phones rang, tickets sold, and boom. It was sold out on Wednesday night, just like that. The venue change was a clear signal of Eala's newfound status. She had arrived in Toronto not as a rising star, but as a bona fide phenomenon. The tournament had to rearrange its schedule to accommodate her popularity. Something they had never done for a player ranked outside the top 5. In fact, the center court at SoBi Stadium turned into a Filipino fiesta as Eala continued her hot form by beating world number 71 Alycia Parks. The Filipino community transformed the stadium into a celebration of pride and identity. Hale, who had been running the tournament for nearly 2 decades, didn't hide his amazement. Alex is an absolute blessing to the sport of tennis at our tournament, Hale said. So it's an amazing tournament to have her here playing singles and doubles with Venus Williams. And his actions spoke louder than his words. Moving a player from the grandstand to center court isn't a decision organizers make lightly. It affects everything. Television coverage, ticket pricing, scheduling conflicts. But Hale had no choice. The demand was too great. The move also reflected a deeper reality. Eala wasn't just selling tickets, she was transforming the tournament itself. The food offerings were changing. The scheduling was changing. The very atmosphere of the Canadian Open was being reshaped by the presence of one 21-year-old from Manila. Even her doubles match with Venus Williams was scheduled for center court on the Thursday night. Something Hale admitted was the first time he could remember a first-round doubles match being scheduled on center court. Eala's arrival in Toronto marked a turning point not just for her career, but for the tournament itself. And the world was watching to see what would happen next. The demand was so overwhelming that the Canadian Open organizers had to make a decision they had never made before in tournament history. They added chicken adobo to the menu. For a player ranked outside the top 5, for a 21-year-old making her debut in Toronto, for a woman who had just won her first WTA title less than 48 hours earlier. Karl Hale, the tournament director, had been running the Canadian Open for nearly 2 decades. He had seen the biggest names in tennis history pass through Sobeys Stadium: Serena Williams, Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, Novak Djokovic. He had witnessed the farewell tours, the comeback stories, the record-breaking performances. But he had never seen anything quite like this. "It's the first time I've ever heard of a tournament. Halfway through the tournament, add a food offering just because of a player," Hale admitted. The dish was served at the changeover kitchen at Sobeys Stadium, replacing their chicken teriyaki rice bowl for the day. It was priced at CAD 17, approximately $7.30. A Filipino flag was also displayed at the food stalls, as several of Eala's supporters flocked in support of the rising star. The gesture was small, but it spoke volumes about the cultural phenomenon unfolding in Toronto. Journalist and former tennis player Dion Castillejo, who was covering the tournament for ABS-CBN, captured the moment on video. The chicken adobo rice bowl became an instant symbol of the Eala effect, a tournament adapting to accommodate a player who had turned the Canadian Open into a Filipino festival. The menu change wasn't the only first for the tournament. Eala's popularity had already forced organizers to move her match from the 2,800-seat grandstand to center court. They had added traditional Filipino food to the menu, and they had watched as ticket sales shattered every expectation. Hale, who had been running the tournament for nearly 2 decades, called Eala an absolute blessing to the sport of tennis at our tournament. "So it's an amazing tournament to have her here playing singles and doubles with Venus Williams." The price hike phenomenon was just the latest chapter in a story that had been building since January. But the demand didn't stop there. Even with the increased prices, fans continued to line up in thousands, hoping for a chance that had already passed. And the tournament had to keep adapting to a phenomenon that was growing faster than anyone could have predicted. But what made the adobo revolution so significant wasn't just the food. It was what it represented. The Canadian Open, one of the most prestigious tournaments on the WTA calendar, was acknowledging that Alex Eala was not just a player. She was a cultural phenomenon that was transforming the tournament in ways no one had ever seen before. "It's great to have the Filipino community out in droves here," Hale said, and he meant it. The community had turned Sobeys Stadium into a celebration of Filipino pride, and the tournament was proud to be part of it. The adobo revolution was a testament to the power of representation. For the thousands of Filipino fans who packed the stands, seeing their culture celebrated at a WTA 1000 tournament was a moment of validation. And for the tennis world, it was a reminder that Alex Eala had become something far bigger than a tennis player. She had become a movement. The scene at Sobeys Stadium was unlike anything the Canadian Open had ever witnessed. More than 10,000 fans packed center court. Philippine flags waved from every section. The chants of "Let's go, Alex!" shook the stadium with an intensity that felt more like a World Cup match than a tennis tournament. Signs screamed "Eala Mania" and "Mahal Kaida." One fan even showed up wearing a dinosaur costume wrapped in the Philippine flag. Toronto had officially turned into Little Manila. The crowd was so loud they could barely hear the announcer. When Eala walked onto center court, the stadium erupted. The cheers were reportedly so deafening that the in-arena introduction was nearly drowned out. Every winner sent the crowd into another frenzy. Every break of serve sounded like championship point. For her opponent, Alycia Parks, it must have felt like she had somehow walked into a match in Manila. This was not just a tennis match. This was a Filipino festival. And it was a phenomenon that even tournament director Karl Hale, with nearly 2 decades of experience, had never seen before. "It's great to have the Filipino community out in droves here," Hale said. He told ABS-CBN that the demand had been building for months. "The Filipino community for months now has been calling in, asking when does she play? Who does she play? Where does she play? My mother knows her uncle, sister's brother, cousin. They were so excited to have her. When Eala's schedule was finally confirmed, the phones rang, tickets sold, and boom! It was sold out on Wednesday night just like that. Even Eala herself was overwhelmed by the response. "It's the pleasure of my life to experience crowds like this," she said in her post-match news conference. After her victory over Parks, she addressed the crowd in Tagalog, asking them to wave their flags. Then, in a mix of Filipino and English, she delivered a message that brought the house down. "Alam niyo mga kababayan, linggo-linggo ko kayo nakikita, sinusuportahan ako. Linggo-linggo ko nakikita kung gaano niyo kamahal ang kapwa niyo Pinoy. Kaya proud na proud ako na maging Pinoy. Maraming salamat mga kababayan, mahal ko kayong lahat." The crowd exploded once again. It was more than just a victory speech. It was a declaration of identity, of heritage, of a community that had shown up in force to support one of their own. Leila Fernandez, Canada's home favorite, also weighed in on the phenomenon. Fernandez, whose mother is Filipino, played on the same night and shared the spotlight with Eala. The scheduling, Eala's match following Fernandez's, created a perfect storm of Filipino pride. But it was Coco Gauff who summed up the impact best. "I think the demographic that Alex is bringing to the sport of tennis is so great, and I think all of us should embrace that because we're all benefiting from it," Gauff said in her post-match press conference. She added, "When I played her in Dubai, it was such a great atmosphere to play in. To just see a nation of people who maybe don't always feel represented in this sport, really see themselves out there, I think is incredibly inspiring." The Phil-Canadian phenomenon had transformed the Canadian Open. Fans who had never attended a tennis match before were packing the stands. Families were organizing groups to watch Eala. Children were seeing a Filipina compete and win against some of the biggest names in world tennis. Warren Paul Catacuton, a Filipino from Toronto, organized a group gathering to watch Eala, designing custom t-shirts with Alex Eala written on them along with the words "Rise, Believe, Inspire." Alex is putting the Filipino community on the map and giving inspiration to everyone, Catacuton said. The atmosphere was a testament to the power of representation, and it showed no signs of slowing down. The victory over Alycia Parks was more than just another win. It was a declaration. The Eala Express had arrived in Toronto, and it wasn't about to slow down. The numbers were staggering. Eala had sold upwards of 5,000 tickets on her own, forcing organizers to move her match from the 20,800-seat grandstand to center court. The 10,077-seat stadium was packed to capacity, with Filipino flags waving from every section. The chants of "Let's go, Alex!" shook the stadium with an intensity that felt more like a World Cup match than a tennis tournament. Tournament director Karl Hale, who has run the Canadian Open for nearly 2 decades, had never seen anything like it. "We've never seen a player ranked outside the top 5 have this type of effect," Hale told reporters. "I think her fans were specifically waiting to see when she played." Hale explained that the demand had been building for months. The Filipino community for months now has been calling in, asking when does Mush play? Who does she play? Where does she play? My mother knows her uncle, sister's brother, cousin. They were so excited to have her. When Eala's schedule was finally confirmed, the phones rang, tickets sold, and boom, it was sold out on Wednesday night just like that. Beyond the sellout, the tournament had adapted in ways no one expected. For the first time in tournament history, traditional Filipino dishes were added to the food offerings. Chicken adobo was added to the menu specifically for Eala's night session. "It's the first time I've ever heard of a tournament, halfway through the tournament, add a food offering just because of a player," Hale admitted. Leila Fernandez, Canada's home favorite whose mother is Filipino, also weighed in on the phenomenon. "The Filipino community are super proud. They're proud of anybody who comes from the country, who are part Filipino. The fan base is super amazing, loving," Fernandez said. "I'm just super happy that we get to experience that here in Toronto, where the stands are going to be filled." Coco Gauff, who could potentially face Eala in the quarterfinals if both players advanced, had also weighed in on the phenomenon. "I think the demographic that Alex is bringing to the sport of tennis is so great, And I think all of us should embrace that, because we're all benefiting from it, Goff said. Eala herself remained humble amid the chaos. She addressed the crowd in Tagalog, asking them to wave their flags, before delivering a heartfelt message. Alam niyo mga kababayan, linggo-linggo ko kayo nakikita, sinusuportahan ako. Linggo-linggo ko nakikita kung gaano niyo kamahal ang kapwa niyo Pinoy, kaya proud ako na maging Pinoy. Maraming salamat mga kababayan, mahal ko kayong lahat. The crowd exploded once again. It was more than just a victory speech. It was a celebration of identity, of heritage, of a community that had shown up in force to support one of their own. The Eala Express had kept rolling. She had avenged her Australian Open loss, extended her winning streak to 6 matches, and become the first Filipino player, male or female, to win a main draw match at the Canadian Open. Now, waiting for her in the 3rd round was Caty McNally. The American had just pulled off one of the tournament's biggest upsets, stunning reigning Wimbledon champion Linda Noskova 7-6-5, 5-6-1. McNally already knew exactly what she was walking into. Come watch us. I'm so excited to play with her. It's going to be a great time, she said. It's going to be crazy. I'm expecting a full crowd and every single person cheering for her and my little team cheering for me. The question is no longer whether Eala can compete with the best. She has already proven that she can. The question is, how far can she go? The Canadian Open is just the beginning. The US Open looms on the horizon, and Alex Eala is just getting started. What happens when a 21-year-old from Manila, fresh off the biggest victory of her career, faces a new challenge in front of a sold-out crowd? What happens when a nation of 110 million people, a diaspora that spans the globe, and a sport that has been forever changed by her rise are all watching? The answers are being written. But one thing is certain, the Eala Express shows no signs of slowing down. Eala Mania has officially taken over Toronto. Tickets for her 2nd round match sold out within 30 minutes, forcing organizers to move her from the grandstand to center court. The 10,077-seat stadium was packed with Filipino flags and chants. The tournament added chicken adobo to the menu for the first time in its history. And Eala delivered a statement victory, avenging her Australian Open loss to Alycia Parks. The Eala Express keeps rolling. And the world is watching. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We bring you the biggest stories in tennis, drama, and emotion every single week. Don't miss what happens next.